Hello! We are excited to introduce our ETEC 511 final project to you. Our group consists of Matt, David, Katie, Ben, and myself, John. Although we have a wide variety of interests and teachable areas, our group first came together under the interest of educational games. After bouncing around some ideas, our group narrowed down to the idea of artificial intelligence, AI, specifically OpenAI and ChatGPT. When our group first formed, ChatGPT had only been around for roughly 2 months. Since then, it has taken the world, including the educational world, by storm. The product we are presenting to you today is a choose-your-own-adventure game focusing on the potential uses and misuses of AI technology for students. What are the risks, and what are the rewards of using AI in a variety of classroom situations? Essentially, we've created a point-and-click choose-your-own-adventure game with 4 different course streams for our users to choose and play through based on their interests: math, English language arts, science, and visual arts. Each of us helped to write a storyline to encompass the different situations in which students would have the opportunity to use AI technology in the classroom. That being said, not all uses of ChatGPT are equal. Depending on the user's decision, they may use AI as a supplemental learning tool or to intentionally or unintentionally plagiarize. Depending on the user's decisions on how they utilize AI, they will have a corresponding ending with the game that reflects their choice. Our target users for our project are middle school and high school students. With this in mind, we looked at our project through the lens of usability. What functions within a game will entice a student to play and keep them engaged? What could potentially deter them from playing? Furthermore, what will provide the best learning experience for students, given that our tool is a choose-your-own-adventure game? First off, the thought of using a more text-driven game such as Twine was to hopefully help players build more imaginary reading comprehension. The center of our focus originally was content. Deciding to include multiple subject areas within school would help draw in more users to play the game. While it may seem obvious to some that students should just copy and paste from ChatGPT into a research paper, the lines get even more blurred when using AI in math or art class. When does it switch from becoming a tool to a plagiarism? Using assignment examples from the user's age range would be more relevant and hopefully more engaging as well. For example, in the math stream, students are studying Pythagorean theorem, just like they might in grade 8 or 9 math. Moreover, we were careful not to dumb down or baby our users either with our game. This was reflected in how our story was written to how the soundtrack was created. What consequences of a storyline would seem realistic? Is the game aesthetically pleasing, or does it look juvenile to a middle school or high school user? Is the soundtrack overly distracting or babyish? Are the storylines consistent between different subject areas? Well, we can guess what a user might think. A more important way to understand its usability is to have intended users, in addition to us and our peers, test the product. Lastly, another major issue of our usability is the actual mechanics of the game. Is it intuitive to use? Is it too long or too short? This will be expanded further in our presentation when going through the walkthrough, explanations, and challenges we had along the way when making our game.
Currently, there are only a few resources, such as Interland, for instance, that teach students about digital citizenship. One main issue was that the most available are targeted to younger demographics. While the games are interactive, due to it being targeted to younger to div early elementary children, it lacked the concept and content that would be more engaging and applicable to teenagers and adolescents. Also, it seemed more like the platform's games with some vocabulary words were attached on, as opposed to actual applicable examples that were being applied to the concept of digital citizenship. There has been a growing demand and expectations that adolescents need to use technology in order to demonstrate research and digital literacy. The most vital is to help bridge that gap between primary to secondary education with something that is still engaging like an interactive game, yet more relevant and relatable to building the skills of digital citizenship for success. Studies have shown that there's a rising growth of integration and using of technology to further support the engagement and learning of students. Though through the convergence of social media, there has been a rapid growth in popularity and awareness of using artificial intelligence in designing art to generating written summaries. That has become very mainstream. One of the biggest users of social medias are adolescents. Rather than avoiding or restricting the topic of AI, our approach is to bring awareness to the forefront, where it can be fit into education. We saw this as an opportunity to explore how it can be used responsibly and also exploring topics of how it can be misused. Studies and research have shown that by having simulations of players choosing different scenarios and outcomes and consequences, it broadens them to have a more coherent and holistic thinking. Unlike the research, however, we considered that the learning curve of board games could be too long and might not appeal to certain larger audiences. That is why something that could be used was simple to use and learn was our main focus.
Hi, it's Katie here. I'm one of the project writers and designers. So before we were able to begin coding our game, we needed to lay out the framework, and we utilized this mural app that you'll see here on my screen, which is an awesome tool for collaborative mind mapping. On the left is the first draft of all the pathways that we designed. And then over on the right-hand side, this is where the writers were working and creating a second draft of those pathways. At this stage, the writers really had to put themselves into the mindset of the player and pay attention to areas that were too wordy or confusing for the user, try to avoid repetition in the game, and also look for creative ways that our user could potentially navigate through these pathways. We really wanted to replicate a learning experience as close to what they would experience in the real world and the decisions they would have to make, given the constraints, obviously, that Twine presented to us. So Matt's going to tell you a little bit more about that and what it looked like in Twine.
Hey folks, this is Matt. I am the head programmer for this project. Once everything is on Miro, it was a relatively easy process to transfer everything from Miro onto Twine. I create new passages and then transfer the text and then program the links from one passage to another. Some additional things we decided on doing is, for example, random number generators. So, for example, if a student decides to submit image copy from the internet as their own work, we decided on having a 25% chance that the user gets away with it and receives a B on the assignment, but then a 75% chance that the user is caught and is asked to resubmit the assignment. And these different kinds of random consequences are embedded throughout our project. The idea is that we would like our project to reflect reality. There may be some teachers out there who are unable to recognize if something is AI generated or created by ChatGPT and can let things slide. Whereas in other cases, it would be, or rather an instructor will be able to identify that and penalize the students accordingly. On the topic of reflecting reality, what we found too was that after we've written a pathway, sometimes this doesn't reflect what ChatGPT actually does. So here in the math pathway, we thought that if we get ChatGPT to explain something, we will be able to understand it, or if we get it to solve practice questions, we will be able to get the right answers. As we modified our math pathway, this wasn't the case. So if we get ChatGPT to explain the Pythagorean theorem, sure, it gives us a squared plus b squared equals c squared. However, it does not provide images to fully help us understand what's the hypotenuse, what are the two short sides, what is a right angle triangle. Getting it to solve a practice question, we ran into something similar too. With word questions, it was generally pretty okay. This was able to get us the right answer. However, if we were able to submit an image, For example, this one, ChatGPT actually misread the image. So here it says that the hypotenuse is 5 centimeters and then the side length is 3, but in reality the image was 16 and 12. So ChatGPT gave us the completely inaccurate answer. So this reality is then taken into account as we modify what our math pathway looks like. So there was a lot of revision in order to reflect what ChatGPT actually does.
With the rapidly growing influence of AI technologies, we knew we wanted to create an interactive game that would enable secondary students to explore the implications of misusing AI tools with a focus specifically on ChatGPT. While this sounded simple enough on paper, a number of challenges presented themselves throughout the process. The first challenge was selecting a platform to construct our game. Thankfully, a few of our group members had experience from previous MET programs using the Twine application. The next and perhaps largest challenge was making sure usability was at the forefront of our project design. We struggled with this process, but ultimately decided to approach the usability on two fronts. Proper usage of the ChatGPT program, coupled with the overall interactivity and usability of our game, would ensure that we were tackling the usability requirement. From a design perspective, we faced numerous challenges. Early on, one of the biggest challenges we faced was deciding on a realistic way of approaching our overall goal of a straightforward yet engaging user experience. We had several big ideas that we wanted to incorporate into both the script and the subsequent game design, but ultimately just needed to pull back on some of the ideas in order to avoid undermining the core design principle of usability. Ensuring that our narrative pathways had a logical and consistent flow to them was also a challenge, given the fact that they were being contributed to by a number of group members, and our own inherent writing styles would inevitably bleed into the writing. To solve this challenge, we appointed specific group members to editing and streamline the underlying narrative pathways. Similarly, we designed a custom soundtrack for the game pathways and needed to ensure consistency in order to create as immersive an experience as possible. This was made particularly challenging as there were numerous breaks and loops in the narrative pathways that necessitated smooth audio transitions. Despite the challenges, we were able to work effectively as a group and produce what we feel is a highly engaging, easy-to-use program helping students navigate the influence of newly emerging AI tools. Our goal is not to discourage the use of ChatGPT or similar AI tools, but to promote responsible use of them. We want to thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation and for exploring our tool. Feedback is more than welcome, especially in regard to how we can make this experience as engaging as possible.